Okay, so the biggest question you should have now as we're moving into the mixed factoring and actually culminating the topic is how to know what method to use to factor. So if you remember this sheet, I reattached it today because I added in the last method that I had written didn't do yet before. You're always going to first look for a GCF and then distinguish with the four different types of factoring after that. So dots, it's going to be a binomial with a minus sign with two perfect squares. The grouping, which you're not really that often going to see as much, is going to be with the four terms. Then differentiating between the last two, whether you're going to use add multiply, which by the way, I changed the title of that because I had it called something else that didn't make sense because I didn't call it that this year. So add multiply versus split the middle, you have to look in front of the x squared. If the x squared has nothing in front of it, that means its leading coefficient is 1, and you could just use add multiply. If there's a number in front of that x squared term, like in this example, 2x squared, I'm talking about the example on here, the notes on the split screen, then you know that you have to use split the middle. So when I'm referring to looking at this chart, this is what you need to look at every time you're doing an example. So when I look at number 1 here, the first thing I do is look, is there something I could divide all these three terms by? And the answer is no. Nothing would go into all three of them. So I know it's not that. So now I look down at the four other methods we've learned. It's a trinomial. There's three terms. There's nothing in front of that first term. So I'm going to use add multiply. The only difference here is that there's that y to the fourth. So this was those examples that instead of putting y times y, we had to do y squared times y squared. Whenever the first power is a 2, I would just put y times y. Y to the fourth, I put y squared times y squared. The numbers have to add to the 2, multiply to negative 3. So I got my factors of negative 3. I could put negative 3 divided by x in the calculator. It's just 1 times 3. So you have to decide, should the 1 be negative or should the 3 be negative? In which case would they add to the positive 2? Negative 1 plus 3 would give me positive 2. The second pair of numbers would add to negative 2. So I know I'm going to put minus 1 and plus 3. Now, usually this meant we were finished at this point, but after doing factoring completely, you're now going to have to look and see, could either of these two factors still be factored? And when you look here at y squared minus 1, you need to recognize that this is still a difference of two perfect squares. I could get the square root of y squared, which is y, and the square root of 1, which is 1. So that factor turns into y plus 1, y minus 1. The second factor is just going to come down because that's not able to be factored any further. So this final answer has 3 binomial factors. Number 2 is going to be similar. Again, it's 3 terms. Leading coefficient is 1. Because of the y to the fourth, I'm going to break it down into y squared times y squared. It has to add to 3, multiply to negative 28. So find your factors of negative 28. That will add to positive 3. We have 1 times 28, 2 times 24, no, just kidding, 14, and 4 times 7. So in order for it to multiply by negative 28, either the smaller numbers will all be negative or the larger numbers will all be negative. But in order to add to a positive 3, I know I want my bigger numbers positive. Negative 4 and 7 will add to 3. So I put minus 4 and plus 7. And again, because we have the squared and a minus sign, and because I have the minus sign with the two perfect squares, they could still be factored further. Get the square root of y squared, get the square root of 4, and now I get y plus 2, y minus 2 in place of that first binomial. The second binomial comes right down. Yes, that's my kids still awake right now at 10:34 p.m. Next one I'll do on the next video after I yell at my kids.